Good morning.
Morning, Brian.
Hey, Frank, how you doing?
All right. I have to, you get my message. I have to jump off to go to the Capital Programs Committee.
Understood.
Okay.
Do the best. We all do
Morning,
the best
Brian.
we can. Commodore,
David,
come a long way from tweeting about the Worcester line, Dave.
Yes, indeed.
That's awesome. I'm so happy you're doing this. This is great.
David, I understand you're working on a grant application with Maureen Gary from our planning department.
Yes, yes, we're hopeful to get some money for the for the Quincy
Wonderful.
Hawk there.
Yeah. And congrats on the new appointment.
Well, not a done deal yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I'm going to make you a co-host so you can do whatever it is you want to do.
Cool.
I know the T is not a Zoom environment, so no worries.
No, I can handle it, I think.
Where are you working out of these days?
I am in South Station. I am in I am
Nice.
camped out in Jody Ray's old office.
Nice. That's a good place to be, South Station.
Yes. Big shoes
Um,
to fill in here, but
well, you got a great squad. Paula Fallon's amazing, and really good people over there. So we know you'll do great. We'll just want to give it one more minute. I know some people have to depart at certain times, but we'll just give it a minute. Hi, Isabella.
Hello.
Isabella McKinnon is interning at the advisory board this summer. She just graduated from George Washington, and I'm trying to talk her out of a career in government, but she seems she has her heart set on it. So I jest, but she came back for week 2, and we're very grateful. So far she's seen some of these committee meetings. She's seen the transportation financing task force. She's seen T board meetings. She keeps coming back for more. So God love you. Dave, why don't you jump into it, and I think folks will be joining. I know we have some time constraints, so if you
Sure.
don't.
Let me see. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
So I'm Dave Perry. I'm the director of Commuter Ferry. I think we're gonna tweak my title a little bit and call me Ferry Operations to give me to make it a little bit less hyper focused on the commuter aspect, because a large portion of our service is not commuters. Just like regional rail is shifting to regional rail, we're gonna shift to regional ferry service. I graduated from Mass Maritime in '93, so I'm old. 7 years in the Merchant Marine. I spent my time in the Merchant Marine traveling around the world on oil tankers primarily. I did a stint on an LNG tanker going from Indonesia to Japan. We took a load of, I was on a ship where we cleaned up an oil tanker and took a load of grain from Galveston to Estonia under the USAID charter. And then a lot of mostly then a lot of crude oil service from Alaska to the West Coast, and also product service from Houston to back and forth through the Panama Canal to the West Coast. All the refineries bringing products and gasoline additives back and forth to the Houston Ship Channel and through the Panama Canal. So after that, I wanted to have kids. I got married when I was at sea, and I didn't want to have kids while I was at sea. So I moved into consulting engineering. I spent 17 years commuting on the Framingham Worcester line into downtown. And that's kind of how I got my gig at the MBTA. I kind of advocated for some better train service on the Framingham Worcester line, and got kind of hooked up and met some folks at the T, and applied for a job and started off in capital delivery when I first joined the T, doing commuter rail projects. And actually, I was on working on the Hingham Ferry dock back in my capital delivery days. Most recently, I moved over from capital delivery to the AFC2 fare collection project, and I was the director of system installation for AFC2. So I was responsible for putting all of those readers on all the buses and trolleys and all the subway gates. So hopefully they'll get turned on soon. I'm anxious to see that work come to fruition. So I joined Railroad Ops here a few months ago as the new director of ferry operations. Ferry operations has always lived within railroad operations, and that's really beneficial. And I want to stay here. So the people that were, obviously we had ferry service before I showed up. So, Mimi Lannon and Jody Ray and Ryan Caholen, all, and Mike Muller all dabbled in ferry operations and did it as a part-time job or a hobby. And Mimi was instrumental in the success of the ferry service to date. But it's good to have, somebody solely focused on it. And one of the reasons why I like living in railroad operations is I'm not an isolated island all to myself, and I can also tap into our expertise that we have here in railroad operations, because the diesel engines on our boats are very similar to the diesel engines on the trains. So there's really some good cross collaboration and synergy that I can get from being in railroad operations and being able to reach out to those guys and say, hey, can you go double check what my people are telling me about this particular problem, or when we're looking for new boats and assessing anything like that, it's helpful to have some mechanical expertise in the group. And feel free to stop me and ask questions anytime. So what is ferry operations? It's kind of a broad network of routes and vessels, and really an interesting kind of collection of different things. The way that I like to look at it really is kind of 3 different services that we run, maybe 2.5. The first one is of course the F3 and F4 routes in the middle of the list, which are the inner harbor, East Boston and Charlestown routes, which are very high frequency, very quick trips, and very very slow service. We're not running 30 knots across the harbor there. So I say it's slow because the vessels move slow because of the speed restriction, and they don't need to go fast because it's not a long distance. So we have that F3 and F4 as kind of the core inner harbor service, and then everything else is the outer harbor service. With Winthrop, Hull, Hingham, Quincy, and Lynn. I break up the service a little bit, and I put it on this next slide. And these white lines show the routes in a more geographical orientation. And really, the only point here that I wanted to make was the service to Lynn, in my mind, is a little bit different than the other outer harbor services because it goes into the open ocean. So it's actually a different classification for the vessel that we need to have. And it's more prone to storms and high sea states and cancellations of service due to weather conditions. The service that we run to Hingham and Hull is inside the harbor islands, so it's much more protected and much less apt to get canceled because of weather delays. So that's why I kind of look at it as 3 services: inner harbor, outer harbor. Outer harbor becomes kind of outer harbor inside the islands, and then I guess Lynn isn't even really the outer harbor. It's whatever bay that is, Massachusetts Bay. There's a name to this bay. But anyways, the fleet. Our fleet is approximately 18 vessels, and I say approximately 18 because it gets a little sketchy when we get down into the contractor provided vessels. But We own 149 passenger catamarans. Those are in use most of the day. One of them is in the shipyard in Connecticut being overhauled. One of them is used as a backup vessel. And then one of them is a new vessel that we just acquired in February, March timeframe, and it's undergoing some modifications to meet our accessibility needs. We lease 2 ferries. The 74 passenger catamaran Valkyrie is used on the Winthrop Quincy ferry run, and the 149 passenger catamaran Ava Pearl is dedicated to the Lynn service. The contractor and a subcontractor, our contractor is Boston Harbor City Cruises, a subsidiary of Hornblower Marine. They run all of our service. They have some boats that they provide, and they also subcontract with another company in the harbor here, and they provide approximately 11 additional ferries. So the Charlestown ferries, which are 2 vessels, and the East Boston ferry, which is 1 vessel, all 3 of those vessels are owned and operated by Boston Harbor City Cruises. We have a bunch of big boats that serve the high load, high demand peak service to and from Hingham on that dedicated Hingham to Rose Wharf service, where we have some vessels with capacity up to 400 passengers. And then those vessels, some of those vessels in the middle of the day go and do other things, whether it's a whale watch or a sightseeing tour or anything like that. So it's kind of hard to say that all 18 vessels are only being used on us. You know, the vessels get shared and swapped around from time to time. And then, you know, we take advantage of the depth of the fleets of our contractors and subcontractors to use as substitute vessels when needed. Here's some pictures and descriptions of the different vessels that we have. We've been doing overhauls of the Flying Cloud and the Lightning. The engines were replaced in 2016. We have a midlife overhaul underway at Hornblower Marine in Bridgeport, where the Lightning is undergoing that right now, and the Flying Cloud will be up next when we get the Lightning back. We have this is the 5. Well, this is the age of some of our vessels. The Champion and the Glory are kind of our core workhorses for the fleet. And those are relatively new vessels designed and purpose built for the MBTA. And then, of course, I described the Ava Pearl, the Valkyrie, and the Scudic Explorer shown here in the Bridgeport shipyard is the new boat that will be available to us later this season as a backup to the Lynn boat and also wherever we need it. There's the Glory. It's a bow loading. The Glory and the Champion are identical boats. They're bow loading. They fit into a notch at the terminals in Hull and at Long Wharf. The new dock that we're building in Hingham will have a notch for this bow loading. The bow loading is very efficient. It's very accessible, and it's really a good use for the high capacity runs that we do, especially at rush hour and on the weekends. The Glory and the Champion run a service pattern where one of the boats is in an A service and one of the boats is in a B service. So they're, you know, the hourly service at Hull or at Hingham and at Boston, they both leave at the same time and run back and forth and run the schedule like that. So that works really well. Here's a picture, another picture of the Champion in the notch at the Hull terminal. Here is a picture of the East Boston dock with the Claire. The Claire is, I don't remember what the capacity is. It's around 100 or something like that. This is the boat that most typically runs the East Boston service. And it's a reliable workhorse, except for this morning. It broke down and a couple of trips were late as a result. One was 4 minutes late and one was 8 minutes late. And there's a substitute vessel running right now. Here is the Flying Cloud. These are previously the workhorses of the fleet. These are also bow loading vessels. And right now the Flying Cloud is relegated to standby backup service to fill in primarily for the Glory of the Champion if we have trouble with any boats, but it could slot in anywhere. Here's the Ava Pearl. This picture was just taken on Friday. It is in the shipyard in Fairhaven, undergoing its annual inspection and dry dock. And it will get inspected by the Coast Guard on Friday. We're going to do a wash of the hull and new bottom paint. And then, you pull out the sea strainers and the sea valves and inspect those and go through a whole laundry list of items that the Coast Guard will want to look at on a every other year basis. You have to dry dock the vessels. Here is the Lightning being taken apart in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I took this picture a couple of weeks ago. You can see that the aluminum house is being lifted off of the fiberglass hulls. And it was determined that the aluminum house is pretty much scrap. It's got enough damage that it's not feasible to repair it. So it is going to be scrapped, and they're going to fabricate a new aluminum house and put it on the repaired fiberglass hulls. The fiberglass hulls are in really good condition. They needed some work for repairs, but once that repair work is done, they'll be in like new condition. And so although we're going to call, although this was originally called a midlife overhaul, it's really turning out to be much better than that, and we'll get a much longer service life out of this restored vessel once the shipyard period is done. One thing I wanted to mention is the Sumner Tunnel mitigations. The Sumner Tunnel is scheduled to be closed from July 5th to August 5th. As with last year, we're going to offer some mitigations on the ferry service. There's no additional routes or additional service needed because East Boston, Winthrop, and Lynn are already operational, and they've been operational since April. Lynn has additional seasonal weekend service this year that didn't have last year. So that's good news. That'll be in effect for that's been running since Memorial Day, and will run until Columbus Day weekend, Indigenous Peoples Weekend. The fare mitigation for all the routes going north of downtown in the same kind of general area of where people would be coming in using the Sumner Tunnel. The East Boston Ferry will be free for the duration of the Sumner Tunnel closure. The Winthrop Quincy Ferry will be reduced to a standard subway fare structure, $2.40, and the Lynn Ferry will also be reduced to that same standard Zone 1A or standard subway fare structure. The final slide that I have is our ridership. This is a graph of our 2019, 2023, and 2024 ridership. The blue dashed line is the total boardings in the year 2019 pre-COVID. The lightest gray line at the bottom of the graph is last year's 2023 monthly boardings. And the black line that only extends for January, February, March, and April is our 2024 ridership. At the rate that we're going here, I'm anticipating that we're going to be above our 2019 ridership in July and August. It's also a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison because we're offering more service in 2024 than we did in 2019. For instance, the Lynn service didn't exist at all, and the weekend service on the Lynn didn't even exist in 2023. So it's a little bit of an unfair comparison, but the ridership is, exhibiting strong growth and strong rebound post-COVID. We have great ridership on the weekends. We really unfortunately we have more riders than seats, and we do occasionally leave people on the dock for different trips because of a lack of capacity on the boats. Our total ridership in 2023 was 1.26 million boardings, and if you average it out for the weekdays over the whole year, it's about 4,000, a little bit over 4,000 on an average weekday. Obviously, that's kind of skewed because it's such a bell curve in the middle there. That it's not, that January is a lot different than July. But over the course of a year, our average weekday ridership is around 4,000. Somebody
David,
had
could
their
I-
hand raised. Go ahead.
Yep, Corey Evans from the town of Cohasset. Obviously, we're on the Hingham Ferry. I was just wondering on this, and it's a great service that everybody loves, but I'll get to the point. How does this break up into each line? Are there some lines that are recovering faster? This is obviously average is about uniform, or is it, what lines are doing better than others? Is the question I have at this point.
Yeah, it's I don't have the numbers on a slide are really handy. I think that the going back to the list of routes here, the F1 route, well, what I'll tell you anecdotally and from my observations, on the F1 and the F2H, and even on the F5 service, Monday is pretty light. So we don't have a lot of, that's our lightest day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're hitting it out of the park. The F1 service and the F2H service is very crowded, and it's mostly commuters. On Friday, we're busy, but it's a mix, less of commuters and more of day trippers and leisure riders. And then of course the weekends I would imagine, I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine that the weekends, even at this point, are at pre-COVID levels.
That's really interesting context, especially, I mean, it's not that the less people are taking the ferry, but it's not every day that may account for really the drop. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of
Okay.
a weird, you get a bell curve in the week, not only in the season, but you get a bell curve in the week. Which
Right.
of course, in the back in the day, it was the guy carrying the briefcase Monday to Friday, 8 a.m.
Right.
and 5 p.m. And it was very, very predictable. So yeah, we'll have to, and then of course it's difficult to compare. Our Winthrop Quincy ridership is much higher this year than it was last year. So we're seeing really strong ridership on the Winthrop Quincy line, and our ridership on Lynn. The weekend I really didn't know what to expect for the weekends in Lynn. Because it's just, it's a new service, and who knows if anybody knows about it. We did a lot of advertising. Everybody did a lot of advertising. Everybody did a lot of social media, and we blew it through the roof. We had so many people on the weekends. I was dumbfounded at the ridership, and it's not only Memorial Day weekend when we started. It stayed up there. So that's and then of course the Charlestown and East Boston. The East Boston ridership is very strong. Charlestown is very strong, especially on the weekends. So yeah, did I answer your question?
Yes, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's all I've got for slides. What kind of questions can I answer?
Hi, this is Jared from Lynn. I had a couple questions. Thank you first so much for joining us. We are really excited to get the update, and I'm particularly excited for the wonderful additions on the F5 route. We're just as thrilled and excited as the numbers you just mentioned. It's amazing. So thank you so much for that. Hey, I had a question on the ferry sort of for procurement. Could you talk a little? I am not an expert by any means on vessels or the numbers here, but I was just curious as to how the pricing worked. The Lynn backup ferry that you mentioned, I think it was in the capital program at 8 million, which this is a lot of money. But when you compare it to the other boats, it's like significantly less, particularly some of the capital improvements. What sort of is the driver there that makes that such an affordable vessel?
Yeah, it's a fascinating industry. I'm not an expert, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express or something, so I know enough to be dangerous here. I believe that that what we see on the ferry market is that there's a number of factors at play here. Number one is even though it's the boat, the Scudic Explorer that we're talking about here that we purchased for about 8 million, it's a used boat. So it does, it's just like a car. Once you drive it off the lot, there's some pretty significant depreciation. I think the other thing that we're experiencing here is that a lot of ferry services are being pushed, and rightfully so, are being pushed to move towards greener technologies, hybrid boats, and alternative fuels. And so what that means is that the market for these used boats is a little bit depressed because people aren't necessarily wanting to get into a long-term commitment to an old-fashioned diesel boat. We're in a different kind of situation. Like, we need boats, and we need them now. Like, we can't wait to build a hybrid boat for 3 years and that kind of thing. So I think we made a right decision in buying this boat, but I do think that that's why this boat was available. And I think there's also, we're still kind of feeling our way. The United States is still feeling its way through the post-pandemic kind of rebound. The Scudic Explorer here, its most recent service was as a shuttle to take people off cruise ships and into the town of Bar Harbor. So it was essentially a water taxi in between the town of Bar Harbor and a cruise ship that was anchored, a couple miles offshore. So there's all these kind of quirky services that haven't fully come back. There's a lot of shakeup in the cruise industry because of the financial hit that they took during COVID. So not all the dust has settled from in the maritime industry from COVID, and that's kind of resulted in some good bargains to be had. We're always actively searching for used boats on the market because our needs are so acute. The one thing that I'm always frightened about is I love that we're popular, but our popularity is a problem because, as I mentioned, on that Hingham Hull weekend service, we leave people on the dock, and I hate that. And I've been very worried that we're going to leave people on the dock at Marina Bay in the morning because the boat's going to fill up. We have not yet. We've come close. We've come within one person of filling the boat up on a regular weekday morning at Marina Bay, but we haven't filled it up yet. And Lynn, we're not there yet, but heck, in July on the weekends, we might get there. And we can't take reservations. We have to be first come, first serve. And that's a very difficult conversation to have with people, and say, sorry, you have to wait an hour and a half till the next boat or go find something else to do. So that's difficult. So anyways, the point here I'm trying to make is we're always looking on the open market for used boats that could slot into one of these services. The advantage that we have is because we have a wide variety of routes that we run. I can look at different kinds of boats. I don't have just kind of one boat that I need, to go offshore to Lynn. I could look at smaller boats and put them on the inner harbor service. I could look at medium-sized boats and put them on that Winthrop Quincy run, or I could look at bigger boats and faster boats to do that Hingham Hull run or the Lynn run. So that does make it a little bit better in terms of being a buyer on the market because we're not hemmed in to look at particular boats. So we're always actively looking for boats and we hope to have some good news in the near term on that topic. Nothing quite yet done, but we're actively looking at some new boats right now even.
Got it. So that was in fact a pretty good deal, and you're sort of actively and aggressively seeking others as well, and have what you need to be able to pull the trigger if you find the right one. Okay, great. The other question I had is Hornblower is one of the major vendors, right?
Yep. We have actually 3 contracts to this service is broken up into 3 different contracts. All 3 contracts are with Hornblower.
Got it. I thought I saw something about them going through bankruptcy, and yeah, we just wondered if you could comment on if that is a concern at all, or what you're seeing there.
Yeah, so like a week before I started, they said, "Oh yeah, your vendor's bankrupt." Oh, great. What? Wait, what? Hold on. Can I go back to my other? No, I'm just kidding. Yes, Hornblower is the parent company of Boston Harbor City Cruises. And there's kind of a long history here, but Boston Harbor City Cruises is the remnants of Boston Harbor Cruises, BHC, which was an operation that was owned by the Nolan family for a long time. A year before COVID, they sold and retired, and they sold it to Hornblower. And talk about fortuitous, getting out at the right time, getting out at the peak of the market. Hornblower is a nationwide company, started I think in San Francisco, but they're the biggest player in the ferry system, in the ferry industry in the United States. They operate the New York ferry system. They operate a bunch of other big ferry systems. They also had a subsidiary that was called, I don't know if it was America Cruise Line or something like that. It was the river boats that ran on the Mississippi River. So it was the cruise ships, the smaller cruise ships that were American flag, that did those river cruises. You know, it's kind of like if you watch PBS, the Viking river cruises, the same kind of thing, but in the United States on a much smaller scale. That operation went completely belly up in COVID, and it dragged down Hornblower with it. And so Hornblower had to declare bankruptcy to shed that operation, and they are still in the midst of the bankruptcy. That has not at all impacted Boston Harbor City Cruises. It's resulted in some strange little oddities, but for the most part, there has been no interruption to our service. There's been no contractual hiccup or any glitch in our relationship with Boston Harbor City Cruises. We believe that there's been some angst, and it's possible that some vendors, especially on like their wedding charter service and stuff like that, it's possible that some vendors were negatively affected in the bankruptcy as a result of that. But none of the vendors that none of the sub vendors that deal with Hornblower on our service have been affected. There were some utility bills for the Quincy shipyard, where we have a shipyard where that goes through Hornblower that got caught up in that, and so we had to pay some minor utility bills to keep everybody whole. And we extracted that from our money. Hornblower paid us. Hornblower made us whole, and honored their obligations to keep everything running. I don't know, what the effect is in the market, like if vendors are hesitant to work with Hornblower's result. I don't think so. I think everybody kind of understands what happened here, that it was really a problem with a different subsidiary, and that there's no indications that the ferry services are any kind of financial jeopardy. So we did a deep dive, legal and everybody did a deep dive, and came away feeling as comfortable as we could that everything was going to be okay for us.
Got it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
That's a good point in terms of our contract. I didn't have a slide on it, but we are starting on June 30th or July 1st. Then this next fiscal year, FY25, will be the last year of our Hornblower contract, and we will be going out to bid for a new contract or contracts starting on July 1st, 2025. We are in the midst of figuring out how to structure those contracts and what's the best bang for the MBTA's buck. Do we break this up into separate contracts? Do we bundle it as one contract like the Keolis arrangement? What's the best way to do it? One of the biggest difficulties in the contract and the structure is I don't control my own destiny because I don't own all of the docks. And the real problem is in Boston in Long Wharf, where Hornblower kind of has a monopoly on the docks there, and so it's very difficult to figure out, you know, how we could have a competitor share space with another competitor and how that would work. And frankly, you know, we might be able to work something out, you know, that would look good on paper on a procurement, but it would be impossible to operate, and it would be, you know, it would work fine for the days when everything went smooth, but then once one thing fell apart, the house of cards would come tumbling down, and we'd have real problems. So we're actively working with a consultant to figure out how best to structure the RFP and what do we want to do to, you know, to encourage competition. We want to see competition. We want to offer people a chance, but we can't do it at the expense of the rider experience. Corey, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention and say, like, on behalf of, you know, my community, the South Shore, really excited to see that your position was added and that you're here and your experience. We're still, I think, recovering a little bit of PTSD from the pandemic when the ferry was the first thing on the chopping block, and our community really had a very strong grassroots conversation about how much of a really part of the ferries, part of the identity down here, right? Even if you don't commute in, you take it. I take it with my kids. I take it to the airport. It really is important. We learned during our Save the Ferry campaign that the ferry was the most on time, had the best fare box recovery, all of those things. And, you know, it's satisfying to see that it's being elevated to really having its own voice. So I'm glad you're here. Welcome. And again, we're hopeful that the Hingham Ferry continues and the Hull ferries continue to be as excellent as they've always been, and, you know, look forward to improvements. But it really is a great service, and I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. You know, I mean, honestly, you know, I mean, it was something that I worried about when I got the new job. I said, you know, what am I, you know, this is, you know, it's, you know, what is it, 1% of the ridership or something? You know, if you're a bean counter, yeah, you know, a fiscal cliff. Okay, well, we're just going to cut the low hanging fruit. So I was you know, a little bit kind of you know, a little bit not hesitant, but a little worried. Certainly, I mean, everybody at the T is worried about the fiscal cliff. There's no denying that. I think that your point is well taken, and the administration is really committed to water transportation. And while it's a small portion of the overall ridership, we're still carrying 4,000 boardings a day. That's nothing to shake us, you know, it's nothing to shake your head at. And you know, whether it relieves people, whether we're mode shifting people out of cars, which I have anecdotal evidence that we do, or we're mode shifting people off the red line or off the commuter rail or off buses, you know, all those services have their own capacity and issues and stuff like that. So it really, I think there is recognition within the administration and within the agency that the ferry is an important part of an overall, you know, transportation solution. And that, you know, if we were to abandon some of these big ferry routes, we'd be putting people back in cars on the Southeast Expressway and on the Linway, and that's not something that anybody wants to do. So fingers crossed, you know, look in your couch for some extra quarters to help us with the fiscal cliff. I mean, and frankly, on the other side of the coin, you know, cutting the 25, our annual budget's about $25 million in, you know, for all of this, for everything you see on the screen right now. So yeah, cutting $25 million is a little bit, but it's not going to solve the fiscal cliff. So it's almost kind of, you know, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but, you know, it's almost kind of like the fiscal cliff is so big that it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like that, you know what I mean? Like you're not going to save it by by doing these kind of little nips and tucks to cut ferry service. So, fingers
Totally agree.
crossed. Obviously, I'm gonna advocate for it, and I have the support of the administration. They're really committed to my success and to the ferry success, and all of the partnerships with all the cities, which have been great. So appreciate it. Brian, what did you got?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. As Corey said, we kind of led the charge the last time, opposing the I forget what they even called it last time, all the service cuts, including the wholesale elimination of ferries. The advisory board for a long time has advocated for more ferry service. It just makes sense given the amazing natural harbor that we have and all of we are the Bay State, so we should have more people on boats, not fewer. And I just wanted to encourage you to, consider thinking strategically. I helped bring the MCCA boats up here a long time ago in a different life. There's no reason why a convention center authority should be running ferries. I'd urge you to think strategically about figuring out a way to integrate that at least into the fare structure of the T and probably the scheduling structure. And I'd even encourage you to consider going a little further. I think the T should be going up the Mystic River, and I think there's a lot more that we can be doing with ferries here in the Commonwealth. And it's the most natural form of it's the oldest form of public transportation we have here in Boston.
That's right.
So,
I have some really neat images. I was doing some research because somehow we named the East Boston stop, we named it the Lewis Mall Wharf. And that got under my skin because Lewis Wharf is in the North End. And I never thought that Lewis Mall Wharf was a thing. And so I did some research, and the Boston Public Library has a great tool where you can overlay some historic maps. And sure enough, the bottom line is it wasn't Lewis Mall Wharf. Somehow somebody got confused and named it wrong. But the interesting thing is that East Boston ferry, the East Boston terminal, is the same general location with some land infill as the ferry that was running in the 1770s. So when you say a long time, I mean, the Boston side, of course, has changed a little bit. It used to go kind of further up towards the North End, but that route has been in service, obviously with some breaks in the 1900s, but that route's been in service for hundreds of years, which is really neat. In terms of strategic stuff, the MassDOT is going to publish an RFP for a water transportation study at the end of this month. I know many of you are on the list of people who will get the notification. I'll make sure that all of you are. That's going to be a MassDOT-led study of water transportation for the whole region and all that kind of stuff. And so that's really going to be exciting to build on some of the studies that have been done by some of the other entities. Boston Harbor Now did a very comprehensive study a few years ago that I think will be a good foundational stepping point for this study. But yeah, I'm excited to look at what we can do. In terms of my near-term strategy, if you handed me a blank check and some boats, the first thing I would do was what Senator Edwards is colloquially referring to it as the divorce. And the divorce is to divorce Quincy and Winthrop. And in her words, it's a marriage that served a purpose at a time, and it was wonderful, but it doesn't make any sense. So let's get a dedicated Winthrop to Boston service, and let's get a dedicated Quincy to Boston service. There's no reason to be running this weird triangle of Winthrop, Quincy, Boston. And then, so that's kind of, that's the first thing that I would try to do if I could. And I don't need a strategic plan to tell me that's a good idea. I think it's pretty obvious to anybody. I've had a lot of discussions with the Seaport TMA, the Seaport Transportation Management Association or whatever like that. They're the ones who own that service that goes to the Seaport. They were invented and they run a service that goes from North Station to Seaport. And they're really, the problem they were trying to solve was for those companies that were building up in the Seaport, how do they get their employees that are on the North Shore to the seaport? So that's why they started that North Shore to the North Station to Seaport service. And then they also added in that East Boston to Seaport service. The Seaport TMA is funded by, in perpetuity by money that the Seaport developers have to pay in to that TMA. And then the companies that pay in, their employees ride those ferries for free. And then the rest of the excess seats, if there are any, are open to the public at $5 a head. So, and then you got the Encore Casino ferry, and then you got the water taxis, and then you got the private service going over to Logan Airport. I look at the ferry system, especially in the Inner Harbor, as analogous to the olden days in the 1800s when you had 30 different streetcar railways running around all of the city streets, and everybody was going every which way, and there was no no coordination of schedules, and everybody was in competition and running around each other. And I go out and look out on the harbor, and I see all these boats going every which way, and I know that they're conflicting and all that kind of stuff. So your point's well taken. That's going to take some, there's some untangling to do there. The whole funding structure of the Seaport TMA is an obstacle to consolidation and coordination. But it's nothing that smart people can't solve. So that's a longer term thing. I would really like to get some, and there's really a lot of good ideas here where you could run kind of a circuit. You could almost turn the Inner Harbor into a circular circuit. Get a bunch of boats, get 10 boats, run it on a 6-minute headway or something, where you don't have to look at a schedule. You just show up at a dock, and they can be little docks, anywhere where there's a little green spot of grass, up on the north end in between the ice rink and the Coast Guard. There's like a little, put a dock in right there. It doesn't have to be a full-blown Hingham terminal, just throw a dock in for a little water taxi, and bing bang boom, you'd have and so we can dream big. We'll see what the study says, but there's lots of ideas and lots of obstacles and lots of things to navigate. But
I'm happy. We're happy to work with you on that, Dave. And like I said, I actually signed the contracts to bring those 2 boats up here in 2018. I had to hold my nose while I did it, but we will. We are on your side, and I think I'm happy to say we're probably the biggest cheerleader for ferry transportation around here outside of the MBTA itself. But Mayor Nicholson is our chair of this committee, and he keeps us on our toes and makes sure that we're always looking for more ferry options. So.
Yes, good to meet you, Mayor. I've enjoyed working with Jim and all the city councilors. I was there for the opening day, and that was really fun. Great to see such support from everybody, and really interesting to see how diverse the service is. And this is just anecdotal from me riding the boat, but it seems like the weekday service in the Lynn is a combination of Lynn, Marblehead, Swampscott residents and stuff like that. And on the other hand, on the weekend service, it seemed like it was all Lynn residents, which was really, which I was excited to see. I was on the boat on Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, and then just the crazy stories of people just riding the boat round trip because it's a nice cheap sightseeing trip, enjoyable way to have a snack or have dinner or something. So yeah, lots of fun stories. One of the stories, I think it was General Manager Poftak told me this story about I don't remember who, but he said that what a lawyer in private practice who then joined the T, and I can't remember who it was, and I'm glad I can't. They would leave the office early on Friday night, get on the boat to Hingham, stay on the boat back to Boston, get back to Hingham at their regular time, drive home. Honey, I'm home, regular time. It was a hard day at work. Not to mention that he was on 3 trips at the bar on the boat, on the Hingham boat. So it's a fun. I mean, the ridership is loyal, man. If I were to tweak any of those schedules on the Hingham ferry by 5 minutes, I would, you'd find me, hung from a yardarm somewhere. So it's great.
They're very
to have
happy
ridership.
riders too.
Yeah,
They're
happy
the
riders and
happiest
loyal
riders in the
riders
system.
and you know,
It's a
it's
great
not
ride.
perfect. It's not perfect, but it is pretty reliable.
Awesome.
So, yeah. So Dave, like I said, we're here to support you and the authority and ferries in general. And I'm sure Mayor Nicholson agrees. If we can be helpful, we will be. And we hope that, you know, we can talk to you from time to time and get a sense of how the service is going.
Absolutely. And if I need your help with anything, with any kind of little tweaks or, you know, any of the facilities or anything like that, I won't hesitate to reach out. And I appreciate all the support that everybody's given me, not only you guys, but everybody's been so positive in the first few months of my job here. So maybe I'm still in the honeymoon. Maybe ferries are just that great.
So, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you want to say anything to wrap us up here.
Sure, yeah, I mean, if you haven't already, could you circulate those slides that we went through? Great, thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody. And it was so nice to have you here and get these updates. We are certainly thrilled to be able to do whatever we can to support you and move this forward. So thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, give me a call anytime, any kind of issues you have. You know, my door's wide open and I'm always willing to take criticism or constructive ideas.
So I think the T should get you a whaler to run around in the harbor with.
Whoa,
You know,
whoa,
if
now, oh boy, don't get me.
these
don't
guys
get
get
me
cars
excited.
over at
Don't get
High
me,
Street,
don't
you
get
get a
me
whaler.
excited. Oh man, I'll never be in
Commodore
this
ship.
office. Oh boy, that'll be great.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, everybody.